Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Skip Rutherford. I'm Dean of the Clinton School, and we're honored to have you here today for a very important public discussion about an issue that developed a little over a year ago in the small community of Mayflower, Arkansas, which has now become nationally known and nationally recognized as a result. Let me welcome our panelists, Faulkner County Judge Alan Dodson, Congressman Tim Griffin, Tammie Hynum, the Chief of Hazardous Waste Division at ADEQ, the Attorney General of Arkansas, Dustin McDaniel, and Graham Rich, the CEO of Central Arkansas Water. So we're going to have, I'm going to throw out a couple of questions, or just basically one, let each of the panelists make some opening remarks, and then we'll open it up for you all to ask questions. I guess the first question that I want to ask the panel, and whoever wants to go first can go first. What are the lessons that we've learned since this spill a year ago, and what are we, or what are you doing, or your agency yourself doing going forward? So lessons learned, what are we doing going forward? And Judge, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. First, I want
use your hand mic, Judge, and you have to turn that on.
Test 1, 2.
Yeah.
First, I want to just thank everybody for coming today. Obviously, it's important to a lot of people that we revisit what happened in Mayflower. My name is Alan Dodson. I'm the county judge of Faulkner County, Arkansas. I was the local on-scene coordinator in the Unified Command there, which was the command authority for the emergency response phase of the cleanup in Mayflower. And with that said, you know, to state the obvious, the number one lesson learned with the Pegasus rupture in Mayflower is we do not need to have pipeline ruptures, okay? And not to belabor the obvious, but when we have them, and we're going to have pipelines rupture, we're going to have barges rupture in Galveston Bay, we're going to have less than 2 weeks ago, we had a trailer rollover with over 5,000 gallons of off-road diesel fuel in the middle of Conway. Fortunately, it was not a release, or not a big one. We have got to reduce the number of these incidents, and when we do have these incidents, they need to be smaller. Okay, now those are the obvious lessons learned, and I'd be glad to give anyone my thoughts on those after the meeting when we've got more time. I want to talk a little bit about that unified command. And I would implore local government around the state and around the country and your viewing audience that they need to be involved with the Unified Command. And one of the I guess the most common refrains that we heard was that it was apparently unusual for a local government to be involved. But the local government brings local knowledge, even when we don't have expertise in certain subject matters like environmental science and health, for which we have state and federal agencies. We do have knowledge of the terrain, of the people, the characteristics that you're dealing with there, weather patterns and so forth. So I want to point that out, and I would implore anyone involved in emergency response, you've got to stay involved and represent. Training works, and I think resoundingly you would see coast to coast that once the spill occurred and the response started ramping up, the training that all the responders had became evident. And then lastly, just in the interest of time, communication. It's always going to be a struggle. I think Congressman Griffin would agree with me on that. It's difficult to get a consistent message out. There's so many channels for communication that people use these days, and it's a challenge, and it's one we've devoted a great deal of resources to. So those would be my lessons learned.
I've got a follow-up question for you, Judge. Were you satisfied with the response you received and are receiving from Exxon?
You know, that's a tough question. First of all, I'm unhappy that we had a pipeline rupture, okay? And if there are areas where you know, Exxon could improve, you know, it would be, first off, don't have a pipeline that ruptures. Secondly, I think they could probably work on their communication and the claims process. There are a number of people who had civil claims, and still do against Exxon. That process, that flow of information and the process of making claims could be a little easier for a citizen who is affected.
All right, Congressman Griffin, lessons learned, and what do you see for the future?
I think the first lesson is you're never as ready as you think you are, and you're never as ready as you need to be. Just like anything else in life, whether it's a business, whether it's a government, you can always do better. But a lot of times, because we've got 1,000 different priorities, some things get the attention they deserve and some things don't. And then when something like this happens, obviously it's the most important thing, but it's too late to do certain things at that point. So I think those are some lessons. I think that the event puts an impetus behind addressing the 13.7 or whatever the exact length of the pipeline that's in the watershed. I think it demonstrates that now is the time to act on that particular issue. I think it's really interesting, Log Cabin Democrat did this Faces of Mayflower. You saw that? I mean, you were one of the faces. Where they just, I don't know I think they did like 5, okay, maybe 6. And basically they interviewed people and they asked them some standard questions about the community, the reaction, the event. And what's interesting is you can read those 5 or 6. I brought them. It's like people that responded witnessed completely different events. The perspectives are completely different, night and day. Well, that's a problem. That's a problem. And it says that somebody at some point is either A, not getting their concerns addressed, or B, there's a communications issue. One of those two, most likely. And that has been a challenge throughout this process. And I know this is not a speech, so I'll wrap this up. Maybe I can come back to it. But the gap between what I would hear from, and this does not say, I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong, but the gap, I'm in D.C. some, down here some. Alan was living there, right? So when I wanted to know what was going on, I didn't just close my eyes and make it up. I either physically went up there and asked Alan. I was there when the day it happened, with Alan, the day it happened. But I'd usually call him, or I'd call the mayor, I'd call somebody in authority, and I would get one version, and then I have a sweet tea with Tim or town hall, whatever, and somebody else comes up with a completely different version. And I'm not an epidemiologist, so I have to go to the experts because I don't have a Department of Health, and I don't have a Department of this, a Department of that. So I would just say, and maybe this can be for more conversation later, but I think the different perspectives, night and day, still today, is something that is problematic, and maybe I can comment on that later.
Okay, my follow-up question to you is, with you and your staff working with, how do you rate Exxon's response in terms of meeting the needs of you and your constituents?
Meeting the needs of me and my constituents, I was frustrated almost the whole time. And I would have to divide that up into particular events, to be fair. But I can tell you that I spent a lot of time responding to inquiries from citizens on my cell phone. Almost everybody in Mayflower impacted at some point was given my cell phone number. And what I was doing is someone would say, look, they told me my $5,000 check, which I need to pay my whatever, is going to be here on Monday. And I would say, okay, give me a few minutes. Hang up the phone. I'd call somebody and say, hey, what's the deal? Can we get this? It was down in the weeds that much. That's the claims process you're talking about. That's where I was extremely frustrated, because that's where the rubber hits the road with people's lives. And if you're not addressing that part of the problem, you can't communicate anything. People were unhappy, and they had a reason to be unhappy, and they were letting me know, and I work with local attorneys, so much so that I developed relationships with attorneys I had never known before, just because they were representing people who couldn't get what they needed. So it depends on the scale, and how well they perform depends on the particular issue you're talking about. But I had a lot of, a good thing I was taking my blood pressure medicine throughout this deal, because it was up a lot.
Okay. Tammie, lessons learned, and where do we go from here?
I think from an environmental standpoint, I have to echo what I've heard from my colleagues up here, that, for many years we plan with our state, local, federal, county government. We do tabletop exercises. We plan on what we would do if a scenario like this were to come to life. Unfortunately, on March 29th of last year, it happened. We had done some tabletop exercises. The classroom prep that we had done and some field prep that we had done and training, it worked. We were able to implement it. Certainly living it live and having to deal with the circumstance, we learned things, and we would hope to take those lessons into the field with us in the future if we were to have to deal with another environmental crisis of this nature. I think the other thing that we've heard mentioned is the communication, and I would just echo what I've heard. The communication paradigm was set up, and it was effective, again, as we had it set up in our classroom training, but there's always room for improvement. And I think that we would maybe deal with a more on-scene presence. We had a lot of staff, technical and management level, at the Unified Command and the Joint Information Center. But because the incident was so close to where our offices were located, we were handling a lot of situations out of our North Little Rock office as well. And I think that if we had the situation again and we were faced with that, we might have more of an actual presence of our public information actually in the field itself as well.
All right, my follow-up question to you is, would you eat fish caught out of Lake Conway?
I personally do not eat fish, but...
That sounds like a Dustin, McDaniel, Tim Griffin answer. That's pretty good.
But
You're
what
going to go far.
But what I can say is that, I certainly, if I did, I would not hesitate to eat fish that were caught out of Lake Conway based on the information that I've acquired.
So you would say fish in Lake Conway are edible?
Based on the information I have to date, yes, sir.
All right. General McDaniel, lessons learned, and where do we go from here?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Skip for putting together this panel, Jordan Johnson and all of those who worked to bring us together. I think that it's a great opportunity for us to share some of these thoughts and look forward to answering some of the questions. I think that the most important lesson from my perspective is that out of sight cannot mean out of mind. If you have thousands of miles worth of subterranean pipeline infrastructure in our state, much of which people do not know exists, and much of which has been long forgotten by anyone other than those who are specifically working on it at that given time, that doesn't mean that it's not an immediate hazard. And so here you saw people fleeing their homes with a river of oil through a neighborhood, and one of the most common themes at the time were people saying, I had no idea there was a pipeline anywhere near my home. I had no idea that this was here. Some people did. Some people did know that it was close and knew what to do in the event of an incident, but many people did not. And we saw throughout this process the hand of God at work many times and an awful lot of just raw luck. We were very lucky as to where this rupture took place. I think that Central Arkansas Water would say that it could have been much more disastrous for the watershed if it had been even slightly further south. It could have been beneath the Arkansas River. It could have been in an area where it would have taken 2 days literally to use bulldozers to plow a road just through the forest to get to it. We were lucky. Now, were we lucky if you lived in that neighborhood? No, of course not. But from an ecological standpoint, it could have been much more disastrous in different areas. We were very lucky that somebody at the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, 2 people whose names I forget, but they are heroes in our state and should be, wherever they go, they should be famous. People walking into them in Walmart should walk up to them and say thank you, because we owe them a debt of gratitude, because without being told and without having some bureaucratic directive coming from on high, they literally went and got heavy equipment and immediately on their own sealed the hydrological connection between the cove and the rest of Lake Conway. And the reason, in my opinion, you can eat fish in the rest of Lake Conway is because they sealed the oil and the water containment to the cove area, right there at the pipes at the highway. That's amazing. I can only imagine how much money and time and damage was saved by that simple act. That was not part of any contingency plan. It was good old-fashioned Arkansas common sense. If somebody said, oh my God, if the oil's going in there, we've got to do what we can to contain it there, and they did. The Attorney General's office carved out a role in light, just as those gentlemen did with their heavy equipment. You know, they saw something, they said, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I've never seen anything like this in my whole life, but I know I've got to do something, and I can't wait for somebody else to do it. Well, that's frankly the role that the Attorney General's office took. We'd never seen anything like this. I have an environmental division, and I'm particularly proud of Senior Assistant Attorney General Kendra Aiken-Jones, who's here, and Assistant Attorney General Jamie Ewing, who's here, who've been working on this daily. But we didn't know what to do, but we knew we had to do something. And so very quickly we pulled together very smart people and started assigning tasks. And one of the most important thing for me, and a lesson that I would share with the next Attorney General, I know I see one candidate for AG sitting in the back of the room, is when you have instances like this, you go there personally, you go there yourself, you see it for yourself. You cannot rely on any report from anybody else given to you. Just as the congressman and the judge just said, you have to go yourself and see things. You have to ask questions. I would have never understood the bureaucracy that was the unified command structure and all of the systems around that area if I had not, if anyone had described it to me, I probably would not have believed it until I saw it and experienced it on my own. Now, I don't mean that in any way, Judge, to be critical of the system. In fact, I have been pretty protective of and defensive of the cooperation level between the state and the federal government and the company. But it was a lesson learned for me, because something else will happen in our state. It may be an industrial accident. It may be a pipeline rupture. I hope not. It certainly, we are always at risk for tornadoes and floods. And the lessons that we learn from any critical incident response should be applied to all other critical incident responses. I'm looking forward to the report from Whit O'Brien's that we commissioned through the Attorney General's office, because they studied everything from top to bottom in real time as it was happening. And I think that there are going to be an awful lot of instances in that report where we will see things that we could have done better. All of us, the company, the state, local government, everybody. But unless we take a critical review of our own actions, there's no way to learn from it going forward. So it's been a true experience for the Attorney General's office and all of state government, but I think that the state will most benefit from the lessons that we've learned.
Okay, the follow-up question to number one, this lawsuit will probably not go to trial until after you leave office. We don't know what the next Attorney General will do. That's one. But number two, you also said that you thought the evacuation area should have been larger, that can you touch briefly just, on how lawsuits move from one AG to the other, and then about the evacuation area for the people in Mayflower?
Well, let's do it in reverse order. So you have this terrible incident and people who are in immediate harm's way, and a decision is made. If you are in the immediate vicinity of this flow of oil, you got to get out. That's almost so obvious that it doesn't require any governmental action. You got to get out. But beyond the immediate street, there were still very harmful fumes in the air, dangerous chemicals, soon to be an army of cleanup personnel with heavy equipment, the kind of things that no one would want their children to be around. And if you are one house over from the immediate mandatory evacuation area, well, most people would say, I'm evacuating on my own. I mean, nobody told me I have to leave, but I'm leaving. But what nobody, I don't think, realized at the time was that the company was going to give different legal status to people who were mandatorily evacuated as compared to the folks who just left because they knew it was the right thing to do. And a state evacuation order should not give, in my opinion, some sort of special legal status to one aggrieved party or another in a tort action. And yet it sort of worked that way. And so I think going back, of course, we would, with the benefit of hindsight, do all kinds of things differently, including expand the area for evacuation. But I'm very sympathetic to the homeowners who are having to resort to legal counsel to go to extra steps to get what they're entitled to that they wouldn't have had to get if they lived one house over. So that's one thing. The litigation from the state standpoint. There is one action that is pending currently, which is the action that the United States Attorney and I filed last fall, and that is for penalties, not damages. It's for statutory penalties for violation of state and federal clean water, clean air, and hazardous waste acts. And they are specific dollar amounts per day for violations, and the calculations had to continue based on how long the violations occurred. There was this grand conspiracy theory at the time as to why did the state and the federal government file this thing so soon, especially before we really knew when the cleanup was really going to be substantially complete. Well, the answer to that was pretty simple. Under the federal Clean Air and Clean Water Act, there is a citizen enforcement provision that allows for any citizen who believes that the state and federal government, especially the federal government, are not moving quickly enough so that they can place the government on notice that says, you have 60 days to file your suit or I'm doing it for you. And if the government doesn't file its suit at the end of that 60 days, the government loses a great deal of control over the litigation. And when that notice was filed, a 60-day time ticker began on us, and we tried to settle it, but I mean, we weren't going to realistically be able to settle this case in 59 days. And so we filed our suit, I think, on the 59th or 60th day. And next thing you know, there was a great deal of speculation of, oh my gosh, why would the state and the federal government file this thing so soon? What is that all about? It was actually pretty simple. The time frame was set for us by private lawyers representing private litigants. That case will be ongoing. It's set for February, but we're now on our third federal judge. Judge Moody had it assigned to him, and then he took senior status. It got reassigned to his son, soon to be investitured Judge Moody, and he recused, and so it's been assigned to Judge Baker, and Judge Baker's just in the process of getting up to speed on it. We're still set for a February date, and I don't know if that'll hold or not. That's one aspect of litigation. Another aspect of litigation, of course, is all of the private litigants, all of the homeowners and business owners in the area who have their own private lawyers. That could be going on for years. And then the next big element of government litigation are the natural resource damages claims that are brought under the law by two trustees in Arkansas, one being ADEQ, one being the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. I represent, by the Attorney General's office, represent ADEQ, and Game and Fish is represented in-house by Mr. Goodhart, their general counsel. That case probably won't even be filed until I'm well out of office. Out of sight, it should not be out of mind for safety and planning reasons, and I can assure you out of sight is not out of mind for litigation reasons, because this will be going on for quite some time.
All right, thank you. Graham, lessons learned, and where do we go from here? And perhaps you have the most interesting perspective, and certainly Little Rock is certainly quite interested in where do we go from here.
I think our viewpoint obviously is very focused on the 13.5 miles of pipeline that runs through our largest watershed for our largest body of water. The concerns, and I guess the one thing that we learned out of all of this is that you can never ask too many questions. The more that we became involved in this and the more that we have learned has raised so many questions that at the time before this happened, we were just unaware to even ask those types of questions. We took a lot on face value on the inspections, the flyovers that they do, so forth and so on. And so through the process, what we have learned is that while this has been just a horrible, catastrophic event, it can serve as an exercise for us to be better at responding in the future. We still have many, many, many questions, and we probably have more questions than what we have learned to date about root causes and future plans of action to either abandon or make repairs to the existing pipeline. I think we had made a good start prior to the rupture in working with Exxon, but given what we have learned now, we are better at knowing what to ask. Again, the thing that I go back to is never take anything at face value, investigate, investigate, investigate.
Okay, here's my question. Do you think Exxon, either now or in a year when they submit their proposal to reopen the line, do you think there's any chance that that line will be moved out of the watershed?
Based on statements that they have made, it's highly unlikely.
Okay. All right. Now, Exxon's losing, according to media reports, $450,000 a day by not having the pipeline in operation, which comes to about $160 million a year. Still, it's a $45 billion company, but $160 million a year loss in a publicly traded company is not something to laugh about. So the question is that what is taking so long with either saying this is what we got to do to fix it, or we're not going to fix it? Why is it taking so long to get this thing moved? Or is it not long? Am I just, based on other pipeline accidents, it seems to be long.
Well, it would seem to me that we would be purely speculating into a question that should be asked of Exxon.
They were invited.
I know. And so it would be inappropriate for any of us to speculate. But I would say that lawyers would often say that such things are often litigation driven. Is that the case here? I don't know. But it's not beyond conception that in a case where there is litigation, there's going to be future litigation, and there's a whole lot of potential risk for other similar harm, I would think a lot of lawyers would say it would behoove you to measure 10 times before you cut once. And so I want to know the answers to those questions, and I don't know what the answer they would give, but it wouldn't surprise me if litigation concerns were not as paramount as engineering concerns in that.
Well, then let me ask again, because I know we can't speak for Exxon. Okay, Congressman.
Well, I just want to mention PHMSA plays a critical role here. If they don't want that to happen, ultimately, I think they can keep that from happening. If they can document specific concerns. Now, I've got the letter that's dated today, which is the approval of the southern part. And I know that is not the part that was involved here, but it's the same sort of pipe. You know, I think that if folks stay on the gas, so to speak, no pun intended, I think that it'll be very difficult as a practical matter for Exxon to restart the pipeline. They may want to, I'm sure they do, but I think that I think part of the reason it's taking so long, if it is so long in terms of other cases, I'd have to see them compared, but you know, there are hearings going on with PHMSA. I mean, there is a process that PHMSA is involved with that none of us up here, I don't think, have any direct control over. And so now, I met with the head of PHMSA in my office. Just because PHMSA has approved the restart of the southern segment does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that they're, at least what they tell me, and this is, you know, the president's administration, so they're not, I don't think they're leaning forward in a way that would want to get it going again. They tell me that it's nowhere near going again. And I think that's right. I went out there with John Tynan, who's somewhere here. I thought I saw him here. Yeah, there he is. And to echo what some of the others said before, General McDaniel and some others, if this sort of thing would have happened where I went in a four-wheeler, on the back of a four-wheeler, then it would have been a whole different ballgame. And if you go out there, some of the frustrating aspects that I think relate to whether and when the northern part of the pipeline might be restarted, and I hope it's not. But when you go out there and you see what you see, for example, the pipe going across creek beds that fill up when the water's high, and big rocks, because of the force of that water has, big rocks slam into the pipe. When you start to see all of that, the first question you ask is, well, why wouldn't that been taken care of a long time ago? I mean, you can ride by it on a four-wheeler and step on it. And, you know, insulation that sort of supposedly is protected from the rocks and all, it's hanging off. I mean, so it seems to me, I'm not sure, based on what I saw out there, I'm not sure anybody thinks that it's going to start up anytime soon. And I hope it won't. It would seem to me if they were trying to make a good case for restarting it, they would do the basics, right? They would go out where John and I went, and they would try to fix that. Because it seems to me that's low-hanging fruit in terms of what you've got to do before you can make a case to a regulatory authority that the thing's ready to go. So, you know, I could make the case, I think. Maybe someone in litigation can't speculate. I can speculate. I could make the case that it's nowhere near being restarted. Now, that'll be a fight for after I'm gone from this position. But I'm not so sure that Exxon's convinced that will get going anytime soon.
General?
I don't understand how either the company or PHMSA agrees to open 1 inch of this pipe until they can conclusively say what happened in the first place. And as long as we are shrouded in mystery, even in the last day or so, where they're saying that there are these forces that are beyond any human being's conception and ability to foresee that have caused this rupture, then how in the world can they with any degree of certainty assure the government or the people that it's not about to happen again at any random time? And I hope that I was not perceived to be in any way insensitive earlier when I said that we were lucky. We were not lucky. This is a horrific event that has changed so many people's lives, including mine. I mean, this, in its own way. But what I did mean to say is that it could have been even worse. And if it could be worse and it could happen again at any time, I don't see how the government or the company, regardless of whether it's lawyers, engineers, or the bureaucratic regulators or whatever, that would say, until we know what happened for sure, and we can definitively explain to the public what happened for sure and what we're going to do to ensure that it's not going to happen again, I don't see how they open an inch of it.
Well, Skip, we asked too. I think some or most of us here at this panel asked Exxon when they had a little meeting downtown, have you identified all of the, let's just call them sensitive locations along the route, such as the watershed, other examples that would be analogous to our watershed? Have you identified them, and do you have a plan, and have you taken extraordinary steps to make sure that there's not danger there? In fact, when they restarted, right before they restarted this part of the pipeline, I used to know all these dates, 06 I think it was, just before they restarted it, they did a test, but they didn't do all the tests. And it seems to me, if something's been stagnant and it's going through a watershed, why wouldn't you do the whole battery of tests? I understand there's not 100% certainty, but why wouldn't you do the whole battery of tests? And have you done these in other places where there's sensitive locations? And I think that was in a letter we sent. We still haven't gotten a response on that. And so.
Tammie, let me ask you a question. From an environmental standpoint, are you satisfied? I know you said you'd eat the fish out of Lake Conway, but are you satisfied that Exxon has done everything it said it would do in the last year? And from an environmental concern for the people of Arkansas, do you have any concerns at all remaining?
You know, this transition that we've gone through, we had the response phase where we were trying to basically stop the flow of the oil. Then we did a transition into remediation. This process that we're going through with Exxon as a responsible party is very similar and mirrors the same process that we go through with any responsible party out there that causes environmental contamination. The timelines are well within sync, if not a little bit more advanced than what we have on a typical basis when we're dealing with environmental contamination of this nature. So, we called in sampling plans. We asked for them to be extensive. We've got sampling plans. We've made comments on them. We asked them to hone it up to make sure they went into all the areas to sample for all that we wanted. And on March 19th of this year, we approved a data assessment report that evaluated thousands of data that was collected both from a soil, surface water, air, and sediment standpoint. And we're awaiting a design plan and a mitigation plan to actually get them in the field to actually start remediation in Dawson Cove.
So you're satisfied with the progress to date?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, Graham, question to you. Let's say the thing does, you just said that you didn't think it would ever be moved out of the watershed. Let's say that the pipeline does reopen in the next year, couple of years. What would CAW do? What CAW, are there lessons learned in terms of monitoring? Because people were saying, whose responsibilities would you all up your monitoring? Would you up your tests? What would you all do with that section in the lake?
Well, my statement was I didn't think that based on comments they've made today, they were willing to entertain that. But there's a number of lessons that have been learned through all of this. First of all, what we thought was the type of product that was going through it may or may not be the type of product. So that dictates then how you would remediate a spill if in fact it did reach the lake on it. Access is a big issue that we continue to try to address. Frequent maintenance of the pipeline that Exxon does continues to be a recurring maintenance issue rather than fixing it permanently. I'm talking about those areas that are easily eroded and the pipes exposed. Yes, there's a number of things. There's obviously an inadequate number of valves on the pipeline. The the time of response to activate and actually shut those valves could be improved. I could go on, but we really have more questions today. We have learned a lot during this process, but we also have more questions. And the frustration certainly we've had at Central Arkansas Water is our focus is extremely specific that if it does remain in the watershed, we still do not know what the cause of the rupture was. We know some contributing factors to that, but we don't know exactly what it was. The second thing is we do not feel comfortable to date that other segments of the pipe within the 13.5 miles do not display those same characteristics that the ruptured section has, specifically as it relates to the fractures and how the particular piece of pipe was made and what went into that. So I sit here saying that yes, we can plan to make it more safe if in fact it does start up. There's a lot we can learn from that, but we still have so many unanswered questions to date. It's difficult for me to really address all the things that we need to be concerned about.
Judge.
Yeah, thank you. First off, a couple of things. There's a gentleman sitting back here in a blue shirt. His name is Glenn Wilhite. I've got to give him credit. Right next to him is Sheila McGee, the Faulkner County OEM Director, and they were instrumental. They are also heroes, General McDaniel. In fact, it was Glenn was actually the leader of the project that closed those two culverts, and they are heroes right there. Yeah. Stand up if you would, Sheila. I want to thank you guys for what you did. And I know that Mayor Holland, if you keep up with any of the media that's been covered leading up to this annual, this anniversary, there was a gentleman named Jimmy Joe Johnson. He's as much a hero as any of those who have been mentioned, those four, and others from the city of Mayflower, as well as Faulkner County, ADEQ, the EPA, Arkansas Department of Health, and the Arkansas Game and Fish as well. We cannot forget that as bad as this incident is, there was a whole lot of competence in that response, and it starts right here with Tammie Hynum, Dean Vanderhoff, you got Penny Marshall. I just want to mention a few of those names because it's here we are analyzing a year later, which is appropriate, and we should do this. But there was a whole lot of competence there, and a lot of times we bang up our state and federal agencies and our officials, and this was a time when they came together and really did what we hope they do. So I just want to thank you all.
Thank you, Judge.
And I would also say, you know, we feel Central Arkansas Water's concern, certainly with the Pegasus being in that watershed. Well, it's still in the Lake Conway watershed, I might add. And so it seems to me, as someone who is not an engineer, I know there are things that we could do. And if it means we've got to pay another quarter a gallon for fuel, we need to do it. And if we don't do anything differently from this day forward, we're going to continue getting the same results.
Okay, my final question before we open the public is I want to, Graham, this is to you. As you watch all these, terrible disaster movies late at night like Volcano and Earthquake and all that stuff and tornadoes and all that, you had to think about this. What if March 29, 2013, that had happened in Lake Maumelle, in the middle of your watershed? Have you projected what that might, just based on what we know? I mean, obviously, they were able to stop it. Location did help. I agree with the general. As terrible as it was, that we were fortunate where it happened. It could have been much worse, and that doesn't alleviate the pain that Mayflower's gone through. But what if that had happened in the middle of the lake? What have you calculated the damage of what it would have done? What would we be dealing with?
We've not calculated exactly what would happen. We are in the process of completing a vulnerability assessment, which is an update to our original one that was done after 9/11, which will address some of these issues. Obviously, if it had occurred and it occurred at a place where we were unable to get our boom out to sequester what had been spilt and could not get the line closed, it could have been catastrophic, obviously.
And describe that. What would that mean, Kat?
Well, potentially worst case, it could have potentially rendered the lake useless for a while until it was remediated. Now that's a very extreme case, and a lot of it is dependent on the type of break, where it would occur, and the area which we could keep the product from moving closer into our water intakes. Keep in mind, we do have other options. We do have Lake Winona, we do have Jackson Reservoir, and in an extreme emergency, we could pull water from the Arkansas River on it. But I don't want to understate the importance that it could have devastated our lake as a drinking water
For
source.
weeks, months?
You know, it possibly years.
Okay. All right. Now questions. Please raise your hands and we'll get the microphone to you. You have a question in the back and wait for the microphone.
My name is Alyssa Martinez, and I'm a student at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. I'm doing undergraduate research on the spill. I noticed a lot of you have expressed your frustration between what you're hearing from Exxon and what you're hearing with the residents, and I've been going to the Cove just about once a month, if not more, since it happened. I've noticed myself, and Tammie, I've spoken with you about this, that there is a discrepancy between what Exxon's showing in their testing and what we're seeing in the Cove. Would you all be willing to go with me to the Cove just so I can show you, we can bridge this gap and have a solution so that the residents of Mayflower can actually get some answers, because this is a big problem. Because I see sheen in the Cove, I see globules in the Cove, I see big time health issues surrounding the Cove. All of these things need to be addressed, and I would really like, if all at the same time, different time, I'll make plans in my schedule. I'll talk to my professors, really. It's not that big of a problem.
Well, yes, it is.
Yeah, sorry, sir.
That's okay.
But yeah, to really bridge this gap and get some solutions for the residents, because I see their frustration, and over the year, it's gotten to the point where it's at a tipping point now. Either it's going to go one way or it's going to go the other, and I want to get that fixed.
An invitation to go to the Cove.
I'll be happy to go to the Cove. Let me say this again. I would emphasize that I don't have a degree in science and biology or epidemiology or anything else. I have relied on Tammie. I heard Dr. Richard Mason. Did I mess his name up? Dr. Mason's here. Oh, there, Dr. Mason. At the Department of Health. I've gotten bombarded in my office. What about this? What about this? What about this? I read this on a blog. I said, well, don't read that blog. But I read this on this blog. Okay, well, let's talk about that. So, I'm kidding. But in any event, so I got bombarded with questions. And what I had to do is I had to turn to agencies with hundreds of people, right? I have 16 people working with me, and none of them that I know of can test water or anything like that. They do great constituent work. But so I've had to reach out to the governor's agencies, the EPA, and the judge and the mayor and everybody else, and John Tynan and Graham and others. And so, you know, when I got an allegation of X, and I heard lots of them, I'd hear that the testing's not sufficient in the homes. I'd hear the testing's not sufficient in the neighborhoods. I even did conference calls with some of the groups up in Faulkner County, and you might have been on, I think you were on one of those calls. I arranged for some of these groups that were not happy. I couldn't be the scientist that they needed, but what I could do is help give them access to the scientist. And so I'm happy to go anywhere, see whatever. I would be real interested in what this expert beside me has to say, because I know you're dealing with this all the time.
You know, obviously, from an environmental standpoint, Alyssa, you know, I've told you before that if you see concerns out there, give me a call and we'll meet out there. And we have, and the offer's still on the table. If there's issues that you don't feel have been addressed in the reports that we have on our website, or just a complaint or concern that you see, please give me a call. The offer still stands.
Well, I think the question is, if she sets up a trip to the Cove, Congressman Griffin said he'll go. Will the four of you go? General goes. Graham, will you go? Tammie, you'll go? Judge, you'll go? You got your trip.
And it's
Just don't do it in the middle of class.
Dr. Bill Mason.
We would all like to be in the footnote at least.
Okay, all right, now,
You can just-
further questions. Come on, let's go.
just give it,
Questions.
you know.
Mr. Tate, right here. Sherman. Wait for the microphone. No, back here, Jeannie. Back here. Turn your back, Jeannie.
First of all, I really appreciate this opportunity to have all these people here talking about that. I regret that Exxon is not here. But here's a question that I have. From a regulatory standpoint, regardless of whether you're an oil company or a gas distribution company, you must, or you are supposed to, pursuant to regulations, inspect and maintain the gas line at certain intervals. And after a certain period of time, if that pipe is a certain age, normally, regulatorily, it will be mandated that it's replaced. This pipeline has been there a long time. My question is, are you panelists satisfied that it was, in fact, that the regulatory mandates for inspection were taken care of? And that's the first question. And secondly, if they were, what is the leverage, if any, that we have to say to Exxon that pipeline must be moved because it's near a water supply for what, 4 counties, 3 counties? So why can't we mandate it that they move it? That's the second question.
All right, Congressman.
Okay, this will be about an hour, but you've got my cell phone, so call me, okay? But I'll hit it real quickly. My wife's birthday today, and I told her at 5 I was out of here. So here's the deal. So I met with the head of PHMSA in my office. I had basically that conversation. And you know, Deborah's written, the ADG up here on the front row, has written a lot on this, and I think there is a gap between PHMSA will tell you this point blank. There is a gap between the ability to test to perfection and what we currently have. So, a couple things. Exxon could have done much more. I don't think there's any question. And I said earlier, when they restarted it in 06, I think it's 06, they could have done more tests. Instead of just, for example, a hydrostatic, they could have done the hydrostatic and they could have done the line and all the others all at once, right? They didn't do that. But PHMSA tells me that the technology is getting much better, but there's still a gap. But it can be a much reduced risk. The other thing is, PHMSA did find not much. They didn't find much, Exxon much. They find them a little bit, so that sort of answers your question of whether they did everything they were supposed to do. Pursuant to the regulation, right, they were fined, right. So, which wasn't, like I said, it wasn't, they didn't find them a lot, but it answers the question. You can't get fined if you were doing everything you were supposed to do, in principle. So they were fined by PHMSA. The case that I made is fine or no fine. They knew this pipeline had not been active. They knew they were restarting it, and they knew that 13.5 or 13.7 miles of it went through the watershed. And I believe they had an obligation beyond whatever standard they had worked out that they were supposed to do with PHMSA. And you know what? I told this, Gary is, and it's William Mason. I don't know if you heard me. It's Dr. William Mason. I got that wrong earlier. But Gary Prusing, the head of Exxon, I met with him in my office and I said, it would have been much better for everybody. Go the extra mile on the front end. And I've said that repeatedly. If they would have just done the extra steps on the front end, it would have been better for would have been better for us, obviously. Would have been better for them. It's better for everybody. So why can't you make them move it? That's a very good question that Graham and particularly John Tynan and I have been looking into, what the state can do, and this is a discussion for another time, what the state can do versus what the local folks can do. This is an area where PHMSA regulates the maintenance and safety. When it gets to moving it, it gets a lot more legally complicated, as John will tell you. I've been looking at what the state's options are, and I've got some good research on this. I will tell you they're not clear. There's a lot of gray area because of the federal footprint in this area. But I think the number one tool that we have is the political process to get more incensed about it and to speak out on just moving it. Look, I think there are people inside Exxon, and I don't have any direct evidence of this except a, anecdote here or there. I think there are people within Exxon who believe it will have to be moved eventually.
I mean, that presumes that they reopen it at all. I mean, there's no sense in moving it if you don't reopen it. Before I know you got time for one last question, but on this point, we should remember that political process is extremely important on the front end. Right now we have, to my knowledge, 2 proposed new pipelines coming into Arkansas, one of which Magellan is talking about opening, coming from Fort Smith to Little Rock. I have expressed public support for that project because we need it. But I also have expressed my support for the fact that they have been very open, very transparent, very proactive on seeking input at the state, federal, and local levels, and have been responding to that to avoid sensitive environmental areas and to be mindful. The first time I knew that Valero was talking about opening a pipeline from West Memphis to Fort Smith through 3 wildlife management areas owned by the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission was when I read about it in the paper. That did not send to me a good signal that they wanted to be transparent and proactive and being considerate about where you put the next pipeline. And so we have to be much more vigilant. And remember, again, the lessons that we have learned from this is, until we figure out how to burn water, fossil fuels are going to be a part of our lives. And how they are transported is important. And I do believe that pipelines are more safe than having it shipped up and down the highway on I-40. And so as long as we're dealing in realities, we have to realize that pipelines are a reality. But a perfect contrast is how Magellan is approaching bringing a new pipeline into Arkansas as compared to how Valero's talking about bringing a new pipeline into Arkansas.
One question, and then I'm sorry, I know we got a whole bunch, but y'all can catch up with the panelists after the meeting because people
By the way, Tim's not the only one with a cell phone. I hope you all have my cell phone. You can call me too.
Yeah, my name is Adam Lansky. I'm a citizen of Arkansas, and I'd like to tell you what I learned and what I think is moving forward. I learned that there's a much stronger bond between our representatives and Exxon and these companies than our representatives and our people. Had any one of us spilled oil like that, we would be in Guantanamo Bay. This was an act of ecological terror, okay? And I think you guys are playing softball. I really don't know who you're pandering to, but I don't think that you're really helping us. And I think you underestimate the fury and the anger that we feel every day because of this, Okay, so moving forward, what are they doing? Nothing. Because there are more pipelines that are coming in. Valero is opening a pipeline right through our wildlife management areas near Searcy. And this is the future.
I think I just said
you
they're
say
not.
this is reality. This doesn't have to be
Okay,
reality,
go ahead and
Dustin.
ask your que- go ahead and
So
ask your
here's my
question. Here's
question.
your question.
Here's my question: is if the government and our representatives are not going to stop this reality that you see as definite, okay, and we have to stop it, what are you going to do to help us stop it as our representatives?
What is it that you would like for us to stop? No more fossil fuels?
Yes. First of all, no more fossil fuels. Now, that may be a long shot, but we do not... Is there anyone in this room that wants another pipeline in Arkansas?
Yeah.
If this is a democracy, is that a minority?
Well,
Is this who has the gold makes the rules?
We're not running a pipeline contest today. What we're trying to do is figure out what we learned from this and where we're going forward. And so I think the question, you ask a fair question. I think we'll let people have time to answer it.
The short version is, if we were raising hands, most people drove here. And so fossil fuels are still part of our reality. I would like very much for them not to be, but they are. So we have to be safe to the best of our ability. And respectfully, I do not think that any of the 5 people who are sitting up here are beholden to anyone other than the people that they were elected to serve. And I think that the people of Arkansas, frankly, are pretty lucky to have these people up here working for them.
Okay. I want to thank you all very much for coming. I think this was a good discussion about what happened, where we are, and where we're going. And I think it brought light to a whole bunch of issues. And I think you all ought to thank the panelists for being with us, because they, thank you.